Okay, we're live. Um, okay, so we're logging in a little bit late. Welcome everyone at home. Welcome everyone here. And we were discussing the difference between guided meditation and hypnosis and meditation where you might just sit in silence or have some other aspect of non-control of your experience as a meditation. And the topic, it's an excellent lead in to the topic for discussion this evening because I'm fully aware that people come to a meditation practice not because everything is so hunky dory and they're just like, oh, that sounds like fun. Generally, it's some sort of discomfort that brings us to a practice. Discomfort and searching and dissatisfaction was what brought me to my practice originally. And so our suffering is a tool helpful in that fashion, at least one respect. It brings us, right? It motivates us to seek truth, to come to something like this class and investigate how could I feel more at peace. And so we have this word, happiness, and it's in our Constitution, right? Or is it the Declaration of Independence, right? The pursuit of happiness. Um, and in this book called Be Happy, which Robert Holden, this is based on his happiness class, and it does involve mindfulness and a lot of self inquiry based on the principles of A Course in Miracles. Um, but he says, the very first thing I think is really interesting. He says, so it says that we're all endowed with this inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that there are actually two definitions for pursuit. And we might not be fully aware of that. We might automatically assume the pursuit of happiness is the chasing. And I think that's the thing that's familiar to most of us in our experience is the wanting, right? It's out there somewhere. Happiness, right? If, when, after, right? That's where happiness is. And I think it's interesting that he says there's actually another definition of pursuit. So, like a hobby, right? An activity. And it almost, no one asked Jefferson what he meant, but what if that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what if pursuit is not chasing? What if it's all entitled to life, liberty, and being happy, enjoying happiness? Right. Just some food for thought. And I want to share some things with you from this chapter in Robert Holden's book where he talks about the chasing. And I think it's really relevant to the goals for our meditation, right? Whether we want to participate in something that's going to guarantee us some kind of inducement of calm or what we consider to be peaceful or just a better state than the one we're in now, right? Chasing states. So forgive me, some of you may have heard this, the story that's in here, but he uses a lot of examples of the people from his class. And the cool thing about the happiness class, Robert Holden he's a British author, and and I think he's a coach. I'm not sure exactly. He's the director of the Happiness Project and Success Intelligence. Um, and he's just done a lot of work on this thing that we call happiness. He's got books called Success Intelligence, Happiness Now, and Shift Happens. And they followed him, the BBC followed his class as a documentary and tested the subjects at the end, and they found that people had lasting improvements in their happiness, their subjective happiness ratings, 6 months after the class, which is pretty unusual. It's pretty unusual. So the story is from chapter 14 called Ready, Steady, Now. And he talks about all this chasing and the pursuit of happiness. And he talks about this one person who attended the course in 2006. He says, at the time she was 39 years old, married, a mother of two, and the human resource director of a well-known international company. And she agreed to do an exercise called the happiness walkthrough after her name was pulled out of a magic volunteer hat. So she came to the front of the room and stood in front of a line of numbers 0 to 10 laid out before her on the floor. And he asked her to stand next to the number that was her answer to this question: from 0 to 10, how happy am I in my life at present? Jennifer immediately went and stood next to the number 6. I noted how quickly she moved to this number, and so I asked, how often do you feel 60% happy with your life? And Jennifer replied, I would say I'm 60% happy most of the time. We had found Jennifer's familiar point, which is, or sometimes people call it the happiness set point. There's actual research on it. The figure she identifies most easily with. After a couple more questions, we identified that her range is between 5 and 7 out of 10. She said, sometimes I dip down to about 5, but hardly ever below. And if something nice happens, I would say I can go to 7. So then he asked her to stand next to the number 7 and asked her to close her eyes, take a deep breath, and answer the following question. For me to be 70% happy, what would have to happen? Still with her eyes closed, Jennifer replied, a raise or paying off the mortgage, more financial security. I noted Jennifer's answer, and then I asked her to stand next to the number 8, and I asked her to reflect on the following question. For me to be 80% happy, what would have to happen? 80% happiness was out of Jennifer's familiar range, so she took a little longer to answer. Eventually, she said, both my daughters would be at university and happy. Again, I noted her answer, and then Jennifer stood next to the number 9. Here she contemplated the question, for me to be 90% happy, what would have to happen? After a minute or so, she answered, I would own a vacation home somewhere by the sea, and I would paint with my oils all day long, and I would read great literature, and I would enjoy every sunset with my husband. At this point, I stopped Jennifer's happiness walkthrough, and I asked her, are you aware of how all of your answers are based far off in the future? I wasn't conscious of that until now, she said. Jennifer clearly enjoyed a strong sense of anticipation about future happiness. Anticipation can be a positive thing. For example, anticipating how good your vacation will be is part of the fun of booking in advance. The enjoyment of anticipation doubles the pleasure of every good thing. That said, there is also obstructive anticipation, which is when your sense of anticipation becomes so constant and excessive that it obscures your chances of being happy now. Obstructive anticipation is so future-focused that you end up constantly planning happiness instead of actually being happy. Happiness is never now. It is always if, when, and after something else has happened first. Hence, you end up simultaneously preparing for and delaying your happiness. There's a quote from French philosopher Blaise Pascal. It said, let each one examine his thoughts, and he will find them all occupied with the past and the future. We scarcely ever think of the present, and if we ever think of it, it is only to take light from it to arrange the future. So we never live, but we hope to live, and as we are always preparing to be happy, it is inevitable we should never be so. It says, interestingly, scientific research shows that when people dream about the future, they tend to imagine themselves happier and more successful. Just like Jennifer, they score themselves higher on the happiness scale in the future. For example, the score is 6 out of 10 for now and 8 out of 10 in the future. The reality, however, is that when you arrive at your future, you do so with a 6 out of 10 mindset or familiar point. So what do you do then? Well, either you change your mind and enjoy your new now, or you create yet another happy future and you engage once again in an unending pursuit of happiness. I asked Jennifer to do the happiness walkthrough again, and this time when she stood next to the number 7, I asked her to answer this question. For me to be 70% happy, what would have to happen now? On number 8, I gave her the question, for me to be 80% happy, what would have to happen now? And on the number 9, it was, for me to be 90% happy, what would have to happen now? Interestingly, none of Jennifer's answers were about the world being any different. They were about her being different. She said things like, I will enjoy watching my daughters grow up. And I promise to take all my vacation days this year. And I'm going to start painting again. And tomorrow evening, I will take my husband out on a date down by the river to watch a beautiful sunset together. At the end of this short 20-minute exercise, Jennifer was back in her life again. She was no longer chasing happiness. She was simply making conscious choices, creative choices that would help her to enjoy more happiness now. So if you take the pursuit of happiness to mean a chase or a striving, then it is most likely you will relate to happiness as a thing, a reward, or a place that must be won or arrived at. If this is so, you will start to look for the big tickets that will win you your prize. Eventually, you will forget that happiness is a way of being and something you can choose. You will convince yourself that happiness can only be experienced if, when, and after something has happened first. So what do you have to do to win the prize? In the course, I give students a piece of paper called the happiness ticket. This ticket has 3 columns on it, and the goal is to complete the sentence at the top of each column. The sentence for column 1 is, I'd be happy if. Column 2 is, I'll be happy when. And column 3 is, I'll be happy after. I give the group 10 minutes to fill in their tickets. The goal is to find out what you've told yourself must happen first before you can be happy. I would say most people complete a total of 10 entries across 3 columns. I encourage you to take some time to identify your own happiness conditions of if, when, and after. Here are a few examples of what people write. I'll be happy when I have a loving partner. I'll be happy when I've found my next job. I'll be happy if my talents were more recognized. I'll be happy when I have enough money. I'll be happy after I sort my life out. I'll be happy when I've lost 10 pounds. Whenever you enter a competition, you probably take a quick glance at the rules and also note when the prize-giving ceremony will be. The problem with making happiness into a big-ticket prize is that once you create a list of conditions for happiness, the list never really gets any shorter. Why? Because as soon as you wipe off one condition on your list, you add another in its place. You've entered into a conditional mindset. Thus, there will never be a grand prize draw, which means you will never win. Do you guys get what he's saying there? So if your conditioning, if your mindset is that happiness is conditional, that's how you identify, that's how you relate to happiness, that it's out there in the future, right? So it makes no difference whether you achieve any of those ifs or whens or afters. If your mindset is that, right, it's a catch-22. Right? So there's this really interesting survey. It says, this is not just conjecture on my part. In one famous 16-year longitudinal study conducted by Roper Starch Organization, a cross-section of the American population completed a happiness survey first in 1978 and then again in 1994. Participants were given a list of 24 big-ticket items that are commonly associated with the good life, such as home, car, swimming pool, foreign travel, and a vacation home. They were then asked the following questions. 1, when you think of the good life, the life you'd like to have, which of the things on this list, if any, are part of that good life as far as you are personally concerned? Number 2, now, would you go down that list and call off all the things you now have? The research found that in 1978, the mean number of items people owned was 1.7, but the mean number of items they desired was 4.4, a discrepancy of 2.7 items. In 1994, the mean number of items owned was now 3.1, but the mean number of items desired had grown to 5.6, a discrepancy of 2.5 items. So almost exactly the same discrepancy, 2.7 to 2.5. So after 16 years of chasing happiness, the finish line was still roughly the same distance away. The psychologist Daniel Nettle summed up the research. Over the early part of their adult lives, people go from having few, if any, of those big ticket items to having several of them. The trouble is that their ideal of what would be needed for the good life recedes at almost exactly the same rate as they advance. When they are young, a house, car, and TV seem enough. Later on, a holiday home comes to seem just essential. So this one more thing, and then I'm going to pause so we can discuss. Some people chase happiness and others choose happiness. It all depends on how much time you want to save. Chasing is a mindset. To chase after happiness is to misunderstand who you are and what happiness is. You only chase after what you think is not already there. And he says, whatever it is you pursue, be it peace, happiness, love, abundance, or God, is what you won't yet accept. You chase after what you fear you are not worthy of. Chasing keeps away what you will not let yourself receive. At some point, if you really want to be happy, you have to be willing to give up the chase, and you have to let happiness chase after you. The more you chase after happiness, the further away you move from the here and now, and the more alienated you feel from yourself. Chasing is both a cause and an effect of self-alienation. When you lose your conscious mooring to your unconditioned self, your true self, you will chase after anything that looks like it might make you happy again. But the more you chase, the more out of sync you feel with yourself, and the faster you run, the longer the race becomes. Chasing is a never-ending mindset. And I think we can all relate to the pressure that we feel to be ever more efficient, to squeeze more in. Right there in the research, they find that kids are so overscheduled and their schedules are so busy that they're as stressed out as adults are. There's no time to play. There's too much to do. Okay? So we can pass on this chasing to others, this mindset of chasing. And it's interesting, in further into that chapter, he talks about the other purpose that the chasing can serve. There's another purpose. Can anyone guess? If chasing had a function, if it was as much a solution as a problem, what do you imagine it would be a solution to?
Having to deal with things right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The present.
Yeah. Having to feel everything that's here in the present. Yeah, so everything we've stuffed, every decision we've made that has led us to a place we're not so happy with right now, right? All that stuff can come into focus in the present. Right? But if our eye is out there on the prize, and there's so much support for that, right? Societally, we get so much support for keeping our vision down the road somewhere, being on the lookout for our 5-year goals and 10-year goals and 15 and 20-year goals. Right? And our lists, right? Our lists are generally about doing rather than being. He talks in that chapter about what if we made a list every day that was like a list of questions or a sort of intention to remember, how do I want to be present for myself and others today? Where do I want to focus my energy today? Right? Instead of a list of activities that we mindlessly move through and then beat ourselves up for not finishing at the end of the day. Right? So that would be a good definition of self-violence. Right? First, refusing to be present with ourselves, and then beating ourselves up at the end of the day for not doing enough, whatever enough is. And that the fears we have, because if we start to consider living differently and being more present, right, and giving up the chase, the immediate voice that is going to come in is, right, oh no, right? So how will I know? How do I know if I'm doing enough? Right? Or who's going to mind the store? Right? Is it all going to just, right? Am I going to wind up on a park bench? Right? It's all just going to go down the tubes if there's nobody there, whoosh, cracking the whip. And we can laugh, but this is the stuff that keeps us up at night, right? That keeps us from sleeping. When we finally slow down at the end of the day and it all kind of comes crashing in, we're thinking about getting up and doing it all again the next day. Right? Knowing something needs to change, but not knowing how or what. And I'm not minimizing the impact of that, right? The running from ourselves, not the tiniest little bit am I minimizing that or making fun of it. Because that's real. That's the stuff right there. That's the big scary doorway, right? That's the thing that brought us here. How can I get a little bit of peace without going through that door? Right? And there's a reason for us to not go through that door until we're ready. Because we can't go explore all that scary stuff until we can relate to ourselves differently. We need to be able to stay, not abandon ourselves, right? Not check out emotionally, right? To stay right there with ourselves, be our own grounding and comfort and support and compassion, right? To be compassionate toward ourselves. Like, whoa, I'm scared shitless, right? This is not easy stuff, but not beating ourselves up for it. So, getting ourselves to a place where we can relate to our experience, right? Even just a little bit of experience we have in our 24 minutes of meditation, when we can relate to ourselves in that safe space right here with very little content, in a friendly, curious, compassionate way, then we might have the stuff we need to go to the scary places, to examine what it is we might be running from. So there's our motivation to practice, or at least another one. that if we can be with ourselves, not abandon ourselves. Because we have plenty of encouragement from outside, right? Family, society, culture. Culturally, we have lots right now, lots of motivation. Western culture is especially bad. Lots of motivation to abandon our feelings, right? Good ones, sure, bring it on. But anything that's uncomfortable, anything that's unpleasant, stuff that. Nobody wants that, right? We know disconnection is possible, right? We people will move away from people who can't hold space for emotion. They'll move away from authentic expression. And we know that. We can sense that. So we got to build our own capacity to stay for our own authenticity. Right? And then we don't have to rely on others to validate us all the time because we know we're okay. Okay, so we're going to have a little break and I'll mute this. So if anybody has any questions they want to ask during the break or after class, it is also an opportunity to do that. And you can also email or call me. We tipped into a little bit of some deeper stuff here today. So might be some provocation of thought or stuff or emotion. So just want to be conscious of that and acknowledge that that happens. And go ahead, stretch your legs. Come back in 5-ish minutes. sensations that might be there at the top of your head, whether it's tingling or tension, coolness or warmth. Sometimes people notice heaviness or pressure or dullness. Whatever you notice as we begin this meditation at the top of your head, see if you can come into a friendly, curious, non-judgmental place with it. Just being really friendly. What if you were friendly like a dog with all of your experience through this meditation? Letting your attention or awareness move down and then notice your face. And it's possible there might be some areas of tension in the face. And if you like, you can voluntarily play around with relaxing the tongue, letting your tongue go limp and noticing what happens to all those muscles in your face and throat and jaw, neck. And what happens if you imagine letting your eyes sink back into their sockets, right? Not straining. So everything is just resting. Tongue is relaxing. Eyes are relaxing. And then leaving any remaining sensations wherever you found them in your face. Gently start to move your attention around to the sides of your head. Noticing temples and ears and the space behind your ears, behind your jaw. And if you like, you can experiment with letting your ears drop slightly, or even just imagining they could drop. And see what you experience after that. And again, preparing to shift your attention around to the back of your head and just noticing sensations that might be there, whether you might deem them pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. And you might check to see, as you notice, any tiny positive shift at all while you notice, leaving room for your experience of whatever's there to change. Perhaps asking for a bit of relaxation in that area if you find tension, and then opening to receive whatever happens next. And then gently preparing to shift your attention to notice arms and shoulders. You can start by putting your attention at the place where your neck starts to meet your shoulders, and letting your attention scan down first the left arm from neck to shoulder joint, and then down your upper arm, pausing at the left elbow, scanning down your left forearm and pausing at your wrist, and then scanning across all the joints of your fingers until you reach the fingertips. And then same thing for the right side, finding that place where your neck meets your shoulder. On the right side, scanning across the top of your shoulder, pausing at the shoulder joint, scanning down your upper arm, pausing at the elbow, scanning down right forearm and pausing at your wrist. And then letting your attention move across the joints of your fingers of your right hand all the way to the fingertips. And then seeing if you can allow both arms, awareness of both arms, to come into your noticing. Feeling them both, noticing them both at the same time. And noticing anything that might be there, just being friendly as you can with tingling or tension, coolness or warmth, vibration or flow, or space. Preparing to shift your attention to notice the core or the center of your body, starting at the neck or the throat, and letting gravity gently pull your attention downward as you notice throat, then chest and heart area, and then the middle or diaphragm section just beneath your chest, and then down into belly and lower abdomen, all the way into your hips, supporting you in the chair. And if you notice any tension that's there in the throat or the belly, you could imagine perhaps a loosening or opening of those muscles around the throat, or you could actually just release your belly and let it be free, let it totally rest there, however it wants to. And then preparing to shift your attention to scan the back side of your body, your core, noticing your upper back. Moving down, noticing the area beneath, between your shoulder blades, and then beneath your shoulder blades, the middle of your back, and then noticing your lower back, and noticing all the way down to where your bottom is seated in the chair, feeling the strength of the muscles and bones that support you, sitting in the chair. And then preparing to shift your attention again to notice your legs. Scanning first left leg from where you're seated in the chair, noticing the hip joint, scanning the top of your upper leg and the bottom of your upper leg, pausing at the knee, and noticing shins and calves. Pausing at your ankle. Noticing your attention meeting the floor in your heel and scanning along the length of your foot all the way to the tips of your toes on your left leg. And then doing the same thing for the right leg, coming up and noticing where that leg is seated in the chair, noticing the hip joint, and scanning across the top of your upper leg and the back of your right leg, and pausing at your knee. Scanning down your right shin and calf, pausing at the ankle, then moving on to let your attention meet the floor in your heels and scanning the length of your right foot all the way to the tips of your toes. And then letting both legs come into awareness at the same time. Being as friendly as you can with whatever sensations might be there. Tingling, restlessness, coolness or warmth, feelings of vibration, trembling, flow, or spaciousness. And then preparing to let your attention leave your legs and whatever sensations are there, right where you found them. Letting gravity pull your attention upward. Pull your awareness up to notice and meet the place where breathing seems to be happening. Wherever that may be. The sensation of air entering nostrils warm or cool, exiting warm. Or the sensation of movement of air at the throat. Or perhaps the rising and falling of chest or belly. Wherever that is for you, wherever breathing seems to be happening most prominently, you're just noticing the sensation of it, perhaps the rhythm of it, not trying to change the breath in any way, Just noticing breathing is happening. It happens without your assistance. It's always there, keeping you alive, keeping the oxygen flowing. And you could pause for a moment and notice the space at the end of your out breath. And notice what it's like to rest there for a moment. Sometimes people can construct an entire meditation out of resting in that pause at the end of the out breath. All kinds of things that you can do, right? Notice the anticipation of it. Practice not getting caught up in it. Just being there when it comes, enjoying it while it's there, and letting it move out as it pleases. And now, if you like, see if you can include anything else that might be happening in the space of the present moment, in the space of your awareness. There might be sounds around you, nearby, or coming from outside the building, or outside the room. Or sensations such as the feeling of the ground or your chair, taste in your mouth, temperature. You might also notice thoughts or feelings that come and go. Seeing if you can just let them come and go freely. And introducing this inquiry as an aid, if you like. You can ask, what happens if I allow everything to be as it is in this moment? What's the experience of that? And you can also construct an entire meditation just with this question. Just introducing the question as often as you feel is needed. Coming back over and over to noticing what it's like to be without effort, without control or striving. Just resting in the experience of allowing everything to be as it is. Letting even the meditator drop into the back seat, right? The one who's trying to get it right, to do it well. What if you let go even of the meditator? the controller. Just an experiment in this safe little space that you've created, right? You've come here with this intention, and you can try it out. What happens just for this short little bit of time? If I allow everything to be exactly as it is, noticing when you ask the question, there might be space, a feeling of space or silence. Allowing yourself to savor that space or spaciousness or silence. And taking just another minute as we reach the end of this meditation to relish the effortlessness. Space that you might in time come to know as your true self, your unconditioned self. That isn't in conflict with anything in the present moment. It never is. And as you feel ready, you can start to shift to sending energy into your arms and legs, becoming more aware of your presence in the room, offering gentle movement to fingers and toes, and taking as much time as you need to transition from your meditation space. It's nice to be with you all this evening. Thank you for coming. Namaste.